Hey folks, before we dive into today's podcast, I just wanted to let you know that the new and improved SuperPath Pro is up and running and it's awesome. So I'll just give you a quickie overview of what you get. SuperPath Pro members get access to a library of courses and content. They get monthly one-on-one calls where we pair you up with a peer and give you a simple agenda. It's an opportunity to meet people and kind of brainstorm and talk through content challenges. We're also doing monthly what we're calling SuperPath Socials. So these are group calls. We just did our first one. We had 45 people. There is a sort of large group component, and then there's breakout sessions where you put into smaller groups for sort of specific discussion on a content trend or problem. And then we're also doing private AMAs in the Slack group. So each month we bring in somebody for an AMA and we run that in the Slack group. So all of that is $500 a year. Our goal is to make it the absolute best deal in content marketing. If you want to learn more about it, it's all on the homepage, superpath.co. And if you have any questions, feel free to hit us up. Thanks so much.
I think there are a couple of big bets that we're making. One is that Appolo, I think to this point, has really won on brand. And that's awesome because that is the differentiator. That's what all of us are finding. So we are doubling down on that. We are really investing in our social and evangelism teams. We're investing in community. We're investing in really making some viral moments.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Content Briefly. Today I've got Robyn Showers on the podcast. I've been wanting to have her on for a long time, and I'm so glad we finally made it happen. She's had a very distinguished and interesting career in content marketing, and for the last 6 months, she's been running content at Appolo, which is a tool for sales and revenue generation teams. She explains exactly what it is and how it works and who it's for and all that. But we talk about a few things. One is what it's like to come into a company that's been around for 10 years, has an established content program and team, and what her role looks like in that context. We talked to you about a book that Appolo has just published and some of the details of that project. It's really cool. It's part of an effort, pretty serious effort that Appolo is undertaking to differentiate their content. So it's not just blog, it's not just SEO. They've got books, they've got video, they've got academy, they have a number of different things, but Robyn explains in some detail what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're going about differentiating content, how they treat it like a product, which I really like. So the book story on its own is fascinating. And there are links in the show notes to the Amazon version and the web version. The web version's free if you want to check it out. But anyways, tons of good stuff here. Robyn was really a wealth of wisdom and it was just great to talk to her. I also just want to quickly apologize that I'm not in my normal podcast studio, aka home office, so I don't have my nice microphone. So I do apologize if the quality of the audio is not as good as it normally is in this episode. But despite all that, really good conversation. I very much enjoyed it, and I hope you do too. Content Briefly is produced by our friends at Minutia. To learn more about their podcast production service, as well as their other adaptive content marketing services, check out minutia.com in the show notes. Hey everybody, Jimmy from SuperPath here today. Very excited to have Robyn Showers, currently running content at Appolo, but you've run content at Vimeo. I think you had a stint at HubSpot, done some agency work. You've had a really cool career in content marketing. I'd love to chat a little bit about that. So thank you for being here, Robyn. And would you mind just introducing yourself to folks who don't already know you? Just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you've been up to for the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, I'm Robyn. I am the director of content at Appolo. I was previously the director of content and social over at Vimeo. And I have also done stints at, like you mentioned, startups. I ran social media at HubSpot for a little bit. I've done a lot of things. I've been in tech for a very long time, which has been interesting, I think, especially the last few years. I live in DC with my husband and my cat, who is sleeping down here like pretty calmly. So I don't think he'll join, but sometimes he likes to join if he hears me talking.
Oh, he's welcome.
He's welcome. Excellent. Cat's welcome.
Yeah.
And I haven't done a podcast in a while. So Jimmy, I'm super excited to chat with you.
Cool. Well, I'm very excited to have you here. Do you have roots in writing or marketing? Like, how did you find your way into this world?
Yeah, that's a great question. I majored in English in college, but I minored in journalism. So my master plan was to become a journalist. And then a couple of different things happened. Like, I got really sick at the end of my college career. So I had to take a few extra years to finish school. So I was like, going to go to grad school, decided not to. And then secondly, journalism became really difficult around the time that I was graduating school. So I kind of pivoted. I went into copywriting. My first job was at a publishing house. And then my next job after that was at an advertising agency. And that was definitely a fit. Like I could tell that I was really interested in marketing. I It still fed into that, like how words work, how, strategies of communicating with people, telling stories.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of, yeah, it was a lot of the things that I was looking to do, just in a totally different context. So I really fell in love with it. And then from there, I had started reading the HubSpot blog because I was really interested in how we could get more attention for our agency. Like I was doing a lot of internal marketing for the agency. And the more I read it, the more I realized I actually wanted to be on the marketing side, less so than on the creative services side. And ended up applying for a job at HubSpot. And to my great surprise, got it and
That's
moved
so
to
cool.
Boston.
Oh, so you were in the office in HubSpot.
Yeah, I was. Yeah. That was
Cool.
it was before we went remote. So yeah, I was living in DC before, and then yeah, got the job. Actually, flew up for the interview, flew back. Yeah, got the job, moved to Boston, and actually, I would have stayed at HubSpot way longer if they had been the remote company that they are today. At the time, they were still pretty in person first,
Yeah.
and I tried it for a couple of weeks, like doing it from DC. I just didn't love Boston. It wasn't for me.
How about DC? I'm from DC too. Love
Oh, are
DC.
you? I didn't
Yeah,
realize that,
yeah.
Jimmy. Where in
Well,
DC?
I'm from Maryland suburbs, but I went to
Okay,
school in
nice.
DC, and I sort of always think of DC as home. Worked there for a couple of years after college and all that.
I love it. Yeah, I'm from
Yeah.
Virginia suburbs. I'm from Alexandria originally,
Okay.
but my husband and I live in Capitol Hill now, so I can
Oh,
claim
nice.
DC officially.
Okay, cool. I went to Gonzaga, so I know that area well.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, you do. That's awesome.
yeah. Actually, I worked there for a little bit after college too. Um, okay, tell us about Apollo. I sort of sometimes think of myself as a salesperson because like super path, like I'm the sales guy, but I'm not really like I'm not a trained salesperson. I've never worked on a sales team. I don't like really understand like what the problems that a sales organization has. Um, so I feel like I only have kind of like a rough understanding of what Apollo is, who it's for. Could you give us kind of an overview of that? I think that might be helpful context for talking about content at Apollo.
Yeah, absolutely. So Apollo is really an end-to-end revenue platform. It's for revenue teams, which can be salespeople, it can be founders like yourself, it can be the marketers who support the salespeople, the revenue ops people who also support the sales team, like anyone who's really involved in that. We need to bring this product to market. We need to make money for the business, right? And so that's like all of the things that Apollo's tools help with. We're really known for our data. That was the first product to market. That's where we really went out against the competition. Like look us up on G2. We're at top and to the right of every single chart, which is also part of why I joined. I looked them up on G2 and I was like, oh, a product people like that I can market.
That helps, yeah.
Yeah, that helps. Um, and yeah, we're just doing a number of different things. It's funny that you say that about kind of like feeling like you're sort of in sales, but not really. I would actually say that's a lot of our target market. So we
Oh, interesting.
we are more small and mid-sized businesses than like some of our competitors who are more like focused on the enterprise. We definitely
Got it.
have some enterprise clients, and we serve revenue ops teams, which tend to be at larger companies. But our sweet spot is really like those kind of scaling startups, like anywhere from really anyone with a sales team of greater than one is kind of Apollo's sweet spot. That's where we can
Got
really
it.
come in. But we do have a lot of people. And so a lot of the content is written for people who are doing sales for the very first time. Either they have joined a startup or they've joined another company or they're starting their own company. And so while that's not like, I would say that our power users are definitely those people who are very much embedded in a sales team. Yeah, we welcome and have a lot of content for people who are kind of just getting to know what this sales thing is for the very first
Yeah,
time.
yeah. That's really cool. It's interesting. Like when I first started doing some sales work at Animals, is the first time I'd ever done that. And I would go out and like research things like, okay, like how do I make the transition from like, okay, this is a friendly conversation to like, let's close this deal, and like just trying to like better understand like how to run a call, how to pitch and all that stuff. And you go out and read stuff. And then I find it interesting because like I'm reading content marketing. I sort of get these people, these B2B SaaS content marketers, but then I'm going to take it and I'm going to like apply it on a real live sales call. And like, if it doesn't work, I'm going to be mad. If it does work, I'm going to be thrilled,
Yeah.
and it was interesting being on the other side of the content marketing for the first time, being like, wow, I like actually really need this. Like this better be good information if I'm going to go like test it out on a real call with a real prospect with real money on the line, you know?
Yeah, the stakes are so much higher. Yeah. And we think about that too when we're creating content. We're like, everything that we put out, someone in sales needs to be able to take and make more money by the end of that piece of content. Like it needs to be immediately applicable. Cause yeah,
I love that.
there's no time for fluff in
Yeah, yeah.
sales.
Well, that's actually kind of a cool like kind of mission for the content team that every piece has to like help that person earn more money. Because I do feel like it's harder for one thing that's nice about sales is it's just so black and white. It's like, did you close the deal or not? Did you make more money or not? Whereas
Yes.
like
Yeah.
other fields
You know
are
your performance.
exactly. So that's kind of nice. I wonder, like, do you bake that like that idea into style guide, content production process, things like that to like really reinforce that idea?
That's a great question. In some ways, I would say that we do. Like, we definitely, in our style guide and just in our content in general, we really emphasize plain language, right? Like, we're not going to beat around the bush. We're not going to use the inside baseball terms. Like, we're going to say what we mean. And I think part of that is sort of that black and white line, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
either it's helpful or it isn't. You closed the deal or you didn't. You got in touch with the prospect or you didn't. And so, yeah, I think like we kind of understand that there is no grading on a curve, and we write with that in mind.
Yeah, yeah. Could you give us like a 30,000 foot overview of content at Apollo? I mean, the company's been around, I think, for maybe 10 years. Like it's not brand new.
It's not brand new. Yeah, it's been around for a while. It's really the last, I think, like the last couple of years. Our Series D was last year.
Okay.
And it's really the last couple of years that we've sort of seen this like extreme growth, right? So the company is definitely in a scaling period right now, which is always an exciting time to join. And that's kind of my sweet spot. I've joined a couple of early stage startups and realized that that's just not really, I don't know. I love it in the fact that everything's your own. You can make all the decisions. Like you can kind of try lots of things and go after lots of, I don't know, like try out lots of growth strategies. But I really love process. I love managing. And so I've always found that my particular skill set works really well with a company that's scaling to kind of start to help it like work with all of the new things that are coming its way.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I stepped into a fully formed content team. And actually one of the reasons that I took the job is that content is so much a part of the marketing strategy here at Appolo. I've definitely been in roles where it was sort of where it was either they were trying to turn into a services agency. I have a lot of thoughts about like content should be a program agency, not a services agency. Or it was just they weren't quite sure. Like content has been changing, right? So they weren't quite sure what its role was. Like, does demand gen own it? Who owns it?
yeah.
At Appolo, content owns it. So my boss is the VP of Content and Product Education. And so then across that entire organization, we have the Help Center, we have an academy, we have my team, which is really in charge of content strategy, written content, scripting, copywriting. Like there's a lot of stuff that kind of fits into my team.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then we have social and evangelism under there too. And then we have our own video team, so like our own in-house creative. And I feel like and community. Community also rolls up into us, actually. So it's like, it's kind of all the
awesome.
pieces that you need. Yeah, yeah. And I find that that's kind of rare. So I really admired that they had invested in that Josh, my boss, had really built that out and like had this very clear vision. He's a former salesperson, so he's definitely they talk about companies, they're being missionaries and mercenaries. Like missionaries are people who very much like feel the mission in their bones. And like Josh is a missionary. Like Josh like embodies the mission. And so I loved all that. So yeah, when I joined, we had a couple of content programs running really strongly. Academy was pretty new. And now we have a director of Academy who's really building that up into something incredible. But my team was running that at the time. We were running webinars, which we have recently handed mostly off to product marketing. We're still doing like some big thought leadership, flashy ones a few times a quarter. The magazine, which is like our version of a blog, and that's actually a really big focus for us now. And then what I immediately dropped into when I joined Appolo was we were writing a book, which is now out on Amazon and
I just saw
launched
that yesterday, I think, right? As we record this, it's October 18th. Was that was yesterday that it came out?
It came out a little bit ago, but we had a free day yesterday. So
Got it.
You probably saw a lot of Amazon lets you have 5 free days. So we've been like kind of spacing them out throughout the month.
Okay, yeah, I saw some LinkedIn stuff about that yesterday.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's cool.
Awesome.
I'd love to know more about the book. How did that come to be?
Oh my God, yeah. So that was a huge initiative across a couple of different teams. So it had buy-in all the way from the top, right? Like our CEO is really excited about it. Our mission is to make go-to-market as simple as possible, and so I feel like we kind of treat content like a product here. Like content is part of that mission. And so the book was really, it's a brand awareness play, but it was also at the time an activation play. We had some people who clearly just didn't, or we had heard back from some customers that a lot of what was missing for them was just the best practices of selling, right? Like they were using our tools, but they weren't really sure how to put it all together. And so we were like, that's somewhere that we can help. So before I joined, the team partnered with product marketing and the research team. They went out and surveyed, I want to say 500. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but a whole bunch of like sales professionals on a whole host of topics. They looked at a bunch of data inside Appolo to kind of see like where people were running into stumbling blocks. And then they also interviewed 50 different experts within our community.
Oh wow.
So folks like Sam McKenna, folks like the CEO of Gong, folks like, like these people who really know what they're talking about. And so we sort of like took all of those big questions that had arisen in the early research. And we're like, how would you solve this? How are you dealing with the fact that it is harder and harder to get attention in today's world, and that sales, as a result, is much harder than it used to be?
Yeah.
So yeah,
I kind of thought you were going to say that the content team kind of repackaged some existing blog posts and created a book, and I was going to say, hey, that's awesome, but this is like way, way beyond that.
way beyond that. Yeah. And I would say now actually our job is sort of doing the opposite, right? Is like unpacking it into other content and pulling those threads through. But yeah, so when I joined, that research was mostly done. There were I think we have 9 chapters in the book. 2 of them, or 4 of them were written. 2 of them were like pretty much done. 2 of them we were putting all of the chapters through a review process with our customer advisory board. So we were having them read them, tell us like, yeah, this hits, or no, this doesn't hit. And so we were being pretty, pretty processed about that, but we also really needed to get it out. So we did this launch in sort of a 2-part thing. So first I joined, we set up like, I don't know, an editorial tiger team to attack this. Got the rest of it written, got it fully edited, sent it through like as meticulous as we could put together without like truly bringing in publishing professionals. But I think we did a pretty good job, like a line editing, because it's 30,000 words, right? It's a book. It is a lot of content. And so a lot of our challenge was just, okay, how do we parse this up? How do we build a style guide that, so we were taking notes. So we were in constant contact, the 4 people on the content team. We set up a Slack channel and we were just like, hey, this thing keeps coming up. Do we like using dashes here or colons? Like, which one do we prefer? Or, just style questions like that, all the way through to, is this the way that we want to describe this particular go-to-market motion? Is this right? Does this hit? So that was probably, we pushed the deadline back because it was insane. Appolo is very, very ambitious, which I appreciate, but sometimes we set deadlines that I look at and I'm like, I don't know how it's going to happen.
Right.
So it probably took us a month and a half to get the book into publish ready state, to finish writing it, to editing it, and of course designing it. So we launched it at the end of June on web first. So actually, if you go to Appolo Academy, apollo.io/academy/pipeline generation, with a dash in between pipeline and generation, you can see the book. And so that's all the chapters. It's beautifully designed. We've got all of these incredible graphs throughout. It's also linked to templates and all kinds of things that we built inside the product at the same time. So it'll teach you how to do something and then, essentially be like, oh, and we made this really easy. Go do it now. Like you can take so it's definitely the easiest. Yeah, thank you.
I'll look at it right now. I'm going to make sure we link to this in show notes so that people can check this out. This is really cool.
Please do. And I'll send you the Amazon link too, because, I'll tell you about that in a minute. So that was the easiest way we thought to A, get it out there quickly, and B, help with the issue of customers needing it for activation, right? Like this is the easiest way to kind of use it alongside Appolo. But almost immediately after we delivered it in that way, people came out of the woodwork, and this makes sense. Like I said, it is 30,000 words. It is a full book. And so people came out and were like, can I read this like a book? Where is the book? Can I hold it in my hands? Can I read it on a Kindle? And that is really how it's meant to be read. It's very narrative. It's a lot of first person stories. And so that was our next challenge was, okay, we've never done this before. We're going to self-publish. We're going to get it on all of these different channels. And then we're going to make a lot of noise. So that's what we're in the midst of right now.
That is so cool. One thing I'm curious about is, was there one writer who ultimately pulled all this together, or did different people on the team kind of take on different chapters? Like what? I was sort of curious, like how did the words get on the page?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our head writer, her name is Carly. She's incredible. And I would say she is really the, like, most of the words on the page are from Carly. She has a way of pulling together ideas, of making it very narrative, making it extremely easy to read. We did have a couple of chapters that were written by other folks in the team. So like the email deliverability chapter is really technical. Someone on our team named Janet, who is also incredible, really understands. Know Janet. Yes. Yeah.
She
Janet
was my
wrote that
nemesis
chapter
for a while, but we're friends now. But yeah, she worked at Customer IO, so she knows that email world well.
Yeah. So she knew it already. And so she worked with our internal email deliverability folks, to really gut check everything. And like that space has changed really a lot over the last couple of years. But yeah, so she wrote that chapter, and cool. Throughout the entire process also, I mentioned that Josh is a former salesperson. A lot of the ideas honestly came from Josh's brain. And so Carly for a while was meeting with Josh, I want to say twice a week for like 2 hours each. Like she was just doing these deep dive sessions where they were sort of like talking through the concepts in a chapter, and then Carly was turning it into words, right? And then we were editing it from there. But yeah, it was definitely a team effort, but Carly led the charge there.
That's really cool. Okay, so then you launch it on Amazon.
Yes.
And that's like a whole nother thing. I mean, I assume the intention isn't to like make a buck on it. Selling books is probably not going to change Apollo's business, but what a cool way to legitimize the whole thing. Like it's a book, you can buy it in the place where you buy other books, you can read it, you can put it on your shelf. I feel like that really changes, the medium changes the significance of the content, I would imagine.
I completely agree. Yeah. And that's how we're looking at that part of the play is it's an awareness play. Like now it's also discoverable on Amazon. If you search for Outbound Sales, you find the book, and it already has, I think we've sold over 2,000 copies already. It's got
cool.
It's got like maybe 50 reviews so far. So if you're listening and you read the book, please leave a review.
I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah, please do.
Like I'm actually, now that I know for sure that I'm like part of your target market, I am going to check it out.
I think you'll get a lot out of it. Yeah, I really want to hear your thoughts on it. But yeah, so it is really more of an awareness play. We actually, if we could sell it, if we could give it away for free every day, we would. Amazon actually doesn't let you do that. So $1.99 is the lowest we can sell the Kindle for. So that's what it is. And then we have these free days that we've kind of been promoting throughout the process. And then the print book, actually, I have two of them here. I have the paperback and the hardback. Paperback, hardback.
Nice. That's
very
cool.
Fun,
That's so legit. I love
right? And these are print on demand. So it's essentially whatever the printing place nearest to you, whatever the materials cost to actually print it. So it's like just at market.
It's so interesting talking to content folks, and like as you get into like what's going on in their specific team, like there's these rabbit holes of like nuance and complexity. And it's like I wasn't necessarily like I'm guessing that you have learned a lot about publishing. Or I mean, I guess maybe you had some experience from publishing early in your career, but like getting the book out, how Amazon
that was 15
works,
years
all
ago.
these things.
It's changed so much. Yeah.
Really cool. That's really interesting. I will definitely make sure we link to all that and show notes. It's like, it's a cool way to differentiate content. There's a ton there. So I encourage people to check it out. I want to ask you too about the magazine. So you mentioned earlier that the magazine is a focus right now. Wow. Why is it called a magazine? What's there? What's the intent of it? And then what kind of things are you working on there right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So The magazine, the reason it's called the magazine is essentially because I mean, this decision was made before I joined, but my understanding is essentially because didn't want to call it a blog, right? Like, I think that word has become a bit of a dirty word in content. I don't know. I've now been in several places where everyone has a different idea of what a blog should be
Yeah.
because it's been around for so long. Yeah, magazine's a little clearer. So some part of it was just sort of like we wanted to, and then the other part, which is related, we wanted to we wanted the idea that like this content is very much curated. It's very editorial. Like we spent time on it. It's crafted. And so a lot of the stuff that we do have, a news section on the magazine, right, which is more like a traditional blog. So if we have a press release, if we have a product announcement, all of that stuff, like that does go in the news section. We're not gonna deprive people of the information that they need to know.
Yeah.
But a lot of what goes on the magazine are our customer stories, which we write in a really narrative, like we heroize, whoever we're talking about. We want to get into the nitty gritty of how they did the thing that they did. Yeah, or they're sort of like newsworthy, right? So we recently, actually, email deliverability recently, sorry, I'm going to screw this up because this is a more complicated topic. Google Mail started putting like a warning, maybe you've seen this, a warning on emails that had any images in them, essentially saying like this might be spam, which caused more people to send them to spam. And so the question was, is the act of just adding photos in your email or acting any images in your email triggering this? And then also because the pixel that tracks email opens is read like an image, and that's what they were actually trying to find.
Yeah.
And so, so it was like, can you still track emails, or is that actually going to get you flagged?
Mm-hmm.
And so this was something that like we were hearing from customers, like a lot of people were panicking about. We ran a bunch of tests with our product team and put up an article about what we found. So we do stuff like that. What we are, and if you look it up, it's also like, it's very slick. It's like very coolly designed. And I think that was a lot of it too, is we wanted it to feel like a magazine, an online magazine, not like a blog.
Yeah. Blogs have kind of become like a dumping ground for all types of content,
Yeah.
And then some blogs, there's like a handful of blogs out there that still like stay true to like the early days of blogging, where it's like a place where people kind of like journal and like record thoughts. Like there are a couple like Equals comes to mind. It's a company that kind of does that. Yeah, but I agree with you. Blog has just become kind of like what is this? Like it makes so much more sense to have academy resources. Like I love the magazine idea. Like separate it out so that the reader and the potential customer has a much, much clearer understanding of what they're going to get when they arrive.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know if you know Emily Epstein. She's the head of content over at Sigma and used to run editorial over at Asana. She said basically that SaaS blogs had turned into the junk drawers of the internet, which I just really liked.
I like that. I need to get her on the podcast.
You definitely do. Yeah. And so, we've talked a lot about like editorial strategy. She comes from a journalism background. So I picked her brains a couple of times.
Very cool. I have so many other things I want to ask you. I'll try to keep it relatively brief. You've been in this role for 6 months, right?
Just about. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm nearing 6 months this month.
This company is 10-ish years old. Content is established. There's a team. You come in, you've been here for 6 months. There's so many times on this podcast, we've had conversations with folks who like are hired to build the content program, or hired to like, maybe like the founders or the very early team kind of like was just scratching the surface. They're like, okay, we think there's something here. Let's bring in our first content hire to do this. And this is not that. I'm just curious what you get there and then what, like what goes into kind of like unearthing all the things that are there. Like I sort of think of this as like layers, right? Like, you're sort of like digging through the layers. You find like the fossils over here. You know
Excavation.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Totally, right? There's probably a lot of that. You got to get to know the team. You got to get to know the other teams you may collaborate with. Anyway, sorry, I don't want to answer this question for you. What was it like to arrive, and like what were your first like 90-ish days like? What were you up to?
Yeah. I would say one thing that this role had kind of, I don't know, going for it is that even though the company is 10 years old and content was definitely established, the the company has changed so much that most of the marketing team is actually still, I would call them fairly new. I was at Vimeo for 5.5 years. I think the most tenured person on our marketing team has been there for 4. And so like a lot of people joined within the last year, right? Like we had that Series D. And so there was sort of an explosion of growth. A lot of people were hired. So I didn't feel totally alone, right? It wasn't like the new person joining with a whole bunch of people who had been there, done that forever. So I could learn aside across a couple of people, but there's definitely, there's a lot that I don't know. We have a really good culture of documentation at Appolo, which I love. And that was also, I mentioned I love process. That was also part of why I joined. And so in Notion, there are every brief that we've ever put together. We put together briefs for every program, for everything, anything new that we want to, sometimes that we don't even actually do, right? It's just our way of actually turning an idea into something that we could action about on and something that we can actually now discuss. So I went through the entire brief library. They've kept a really good audit library of like all of the content that's gone out. So I've gone through, I actually still haven't read all of it, but I've gone through quite a bit of it. Like that's kind of my goal is by the end of the year to have read and watched everything.
Nice.
Wish me luck.
I bet that is that's a project.
That's a project. Yeah, exactly. So I've kind of been like prioritizing. And then I would say I actually do keep, it's funny you called it like an excavation. I actually do keep a Google Doc that I have named Appolo Content History Lessons. And it's just anytime I come across something that confuses me, I drop it in there so that the next time I'm talking to someone who's been here a while, I can be like, oh, by the way, why do we do this? Like, I noticed this.
Right.
So a lot of it's been that. But yeah, I don't know. I think that they did a really good job of setting new people up to succeed. Like they're also really big on the product and a lot of, or not big on the product. Everyone's big on the product. They're really big on everybody using the product, right? On like dog fooding. I don't really like that term. So drinking your own champagne. But yeah, so my first couple of weeks were really just getting to know the product, like pretending that I was a salesperson, building lists in Appolo, building workflows from there, reading a bunch of our, like we also have sort of a gong, like, it records calls and then our AI takes insights out of that. So I was going through some of our sales calls. So there was a lot of stuff like that. To sort of parse together. But honestly, I also just was thrown in immediately. Like I said, that book project was hot and heavy, like in the works when I joined. And we'd had some shakeups where we thought we would have resourcing that didn't end up appearing. And so I jumped in head first into that project. And I would say that's the best way to do it. I had all of these grand plans of, okay, for my first 90 days, I'm going to spend this time doing a listening tour, and I'm going to spend this time doing an audit of everything that exists. And then I'll have 6 weeks in, I'll have my early strategy. Like I had all of these plans. They all completely went out the window. But just doing the work actually was, I think, the most effective onboarding. So I'm definitely going back and doing some of that now. Like my listening tour has been woven in over the last 6 months. My audit, I've been a same thing. Like I set aside time every Friday to go read a bunch of our content, watch a bunch of our master classes, and also to read and watch stuff outside of us, because this is a bit of a new space for me. I've been in the marketing space for a really long time, but sales is slightly different.
Right.
So yeah. I don't know. Is that a good answer? I kind of rambled there.
No, I think it's great. I will flag what you said about learning to use the product. I find that is so often overlooked. Like I've done that. Like I worked at actually when Janet, Joy, and I were when we were enemies, we were working at these like directly competitive companies, and I worked there. It was an transactional behavioral email tool. I worked there for like 6 months, and I was writing all these blog posts about email marketing and tips to get better open rates. And one day the founder sat me down and he was like, "Look, stop writing about email marketing. That's not why people use this product. They're trying to understand customer journeys and then build these campaigns that react to the behaviors people take." So I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah. Could you show me how that works in the product?" And he like kind of walked me through like some customer examples and then like kind of helped me get set up to create some campaigns of my own. I was like, "Oh my God, I've had this all Wrong. The nature of content marketing is changing. We all know this. What bets are you making with Apollo's content right now that are maybe different than you did at Vimeo or HubSpot or Brazen or some of the other places you work when the world was different and the content environment was different?
Yeah, this is a good question. I have thought, I mean, every content marketer has a lot about this. Especially, well, I won't go off topic. We can have an aside later about like the role of content within the organization and how you move up. I think about a lot. Um, but yeah, as how it's affected our content strategy, that's huge. So I think there are a couple of big bets that we're making. One is that Apollo, I think to this point, has really won on brand. And that's awesome because that is the differentiator. That's what all of us are finding. So we are doubling down on that. We are really investing in our social and evangelism teams. We're investing in community. We're investing in really making some viral moments, like we're going to try a lot over the next couple of months, just to see how can we reach more people, have more fun. Like, I don't know. I love that kind of marketing. So I'm really excited about
Yeah,
it, but it's hard to measure. And so it is
sure.
going to
The
be.
book, I would imagine, falls into this too. Yeah.
Yeah, the nice thing about the book is that it kind of straddles two things. Like one of the things that we were able to test from the web version of the book, and why we did this first is we could track people who visited the book and then went to the product, and
Mm.
we tested them against people who hadn't visited the book, and people who read the book were like 5.1 times more likely to be successful in the product. And so we have a couple of
Whoa.
metrics that went into that. But yeah, we were able to prove out we know that this correlates to better activation, which got us more buy-in for the brand awareness side of it. Um,
Whoa, that's amazing.
it
That's
was
really
cool.
interesting. Wow, my mind is a little bit blown by that because I think I sometimes think of like, okay, what could we do for brand or how can we differentiate? And then it's like, I think there's a greater appetite for that right now, but then there's sometimes this caveat of like, but we're not going to be able to measure it that well. Like we could try this offline thing maybe, but like who knows, So the fact that you've been able to do both, like the differentiation piece and the brand building piece, and tie it back to product, that is really cool.
Yeah, it was really exciting. We won't be able to do that for every initiative, but agreed. Like the fact that we were able to prove that correlation, I think, unlocks some other things for us. Uh,
Yeah.
Another thing we're actually related to that. Another thing we're continuing to make a really big bet on is we hear this a lot that people who use Apollo are blown away by how good the product education is. We're still investing a ton in that. Like we are going to have best in class product education. We are creating the Khan Academy for salespeople. Like we are going to it's ludicrously valuable content that we're giving away for free. So I think that's somewhere that we're continuing to invest. And then the last one is actually, it's going to sound like a playbook from the past, but we haven't invested a lot in SEO. We've invested a lot in sort of some programmatic plays for finding the data that we provide. And we get a ton of branded search because of the fact that brand has really been our strongest play to date. But we don't rank for almost anything non-brand. So that is something that
What a
we're in
cool opportunity.
a
Yeah.
really cool opportunity. Yeah. So we're investing in it. But I think we're taking because search has changed so much, and because we don't want to. I always say you want to rank, but you don't want to make a bad first impression at scale, right? Like I don't want to be out there just like pissing people off. Like, yeah, we're ranked, but then they decided that Apollo is kind of spammy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Like what is sales? Stuff like that.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we're being really strategic about what we're choosing to write about, and we are setting a really high bar for it. So it's sort of like, okay, all of it has to have a first person opinionated perspective. It all has to be based in people who actually did the thing they're writing about, or who interviewed SMEs who actually did the thing that we're writing
Mhm.
about. It has to have proprietary insights if that's what would actually make sense for this particular article. So we're putting a bunch of guardrails on that I think it's not going to be the high volume play that I've run in the past, where you're pumping out like hundreds and hundreds of articles a quarter. It's going to be smaller in scale than that, but it's going to take a lot more work. It's going to be a lot more work
Yeah.
per
Yeah.
article. So yeah, I would say those are the three things that we're like investing heavily in.
Cool. I love it. Really interesting. One thing I've been doing with podcast guests is we have this conversation. I set a reminder for 12 months and I reach back out, to see if people want to come back on and like, how did it go? Like, could you give us an update on like all the things we talked about that you're working on? So if you're open to it, I will set that reminder and maybe we could do a round two of this sometime.
I would love that. Yeah, especially I think we said before I even came on, I was like, I'm only 6 months in. I haven't had too many successes yet. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So in the show notes, we will definitely link to Appolo. We'll link to the book, both the web version and the Amazon version. And then how about you? Like, where's the best place we can send folks to follow along with you and your work?
Definitely LinkedIn. I am a big LinkedIn girly. So yeah, LinkedIn /IN/ just Robyn Showers. I've got one of those. Oh, Robyn, ROBYN.
Okay, cool. Link will be there so folks can get there quickly. Robyn, thanks so much. You're a wealth of knowledge. You've been very generous with your time and your wisdom. So we really appreciate you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Talk soon.
Talk soon.